A dramatic new front has opened in the escalating confrontation between the United States and Venezuela. Washington has seized an oil tanker off the Venezuelan coast, triggering immediate condemnation from both China and Russia. Within hours, Vladimir Putin was on the phone with Nicolas Maduro, reaffirming Moscow's full strategic support. The message from the world's major U.S. adversaries is unmistakable. Venezuela will not stand alone against American aggression. The seizure took place on Wednesday and marks one of the most aggressive moves yet in President Trump's campaign to pressure Venezuelan strongman Nicolas Maduro. By capturing the tanker, Washington is striking directly at the lifeblood of Venezuela's economy, its oil revenues. For years, these revenues have kept Maduro's government afloat despite crushing international sanctions. Now Trump is making clear he intends to cut off that lifeline completely. Since the first Trump administration imposed punishing oil sanctions on Venezuela back in 2017, Maduro's government has relied on scores of such tankers to smuggle their crude into global supply chains. These shadow fleets have become essential to Venezuela's survival, moving oil to buyers willing to defy American restrictions. Without these covert operations, Venezuela's economy would have collapsed years ago. Now Washington is making clear it will hunt down these vessels one by one until none remain. The strategy behind the seizure is straightforward. Trump believes that by choking off Venezuela's oil revenues, he can force Maduro's government to its knees. Oil has long been the backbone of Venezuela's economy, accounting for the vast majority of export earnings. Without oil money flowing in, Maduro cannot pay government workers, cannot import food and medicine, and cannot maintain the patronage networks that keep him in power. China's response came swiftly and sharply. At a daily briefing on Friday, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun did not mince words. China firmly opposes illegal unilateral sanctions, he declared. Beijing condemned what it called long-arm jurisdiction that lacks any basis in international law and carries no authorization from the United Nations Security Council. The message was clear. Washington is acting as judge, jury, and executioner without any legal mandate. The Chinese spokesperson went further, warning against the abuse of sanctions as a tool of foreign policy. Beijing called on all parties to abide by the principles of market economy and fair competition. China urged the international community to work together to safeguard the stability of global production and supply chains rather than disrupting them through unilateral actions. For Beijing, American sanctions represent a dangerous precedent that threatens the entire global trading system. China has taken note of the relevant reports, the spokesperson confirmed. Beijing's position is that international trade should be governed by rules agreed upon by all nations, not dictated by one country using its military and financial power to impose its will. The seizure of Venezuela's tanker, in China's view, is exactly the kind of lawless behavior that undermines global stability. But the most significant response came from Moscow. The Kremlin confirmed that President Vladimir Putin personally reached out to Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro in what officials described as a high-stakes phone call. The timing was deliberate and calculated. Washington had just seized the tanker, and Putin wanted Maduro to know immediately that Russia stands firmly behind Caracas, no matter what America does. According to Russian media, Putin reaffirmed Moscow's strategic backing for Venezuela just as tensions spike following increased U.S. military activity in the Caribbean. The Russian president expressed solidarity with Maduro as Washington intensifies its pressure campaign. This was not merely a courtesy call between friendly leaders. It was a calculated signal sent directly to the United States and the world. Both leaders emphasized the need to accelerate joint economic and energy projects already in motion. These initiatives span oil production, trade, and wider economic cooperation. All of them fall under the newly implemented Russia-Venezuela Treaty on Strategic Partnership and Cooperation, which came into effect last year. Moscow and Caracas are deepening their ties at precisely the moment Washington is trying hardest to isolate Venezuela from the international community. The Strategic Partnership Treaty between Russia and Venezuela represents years of diplomatic work coming to fruition. Under its terms, both nations commit to supporting each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. They agree to expand cooperation in defense, energy, finance, and trade. For Venezuela, the treaty provides a crucial lifeline. For Russia, it secures a strategic foothold in the Western Hemisphere. A Kremlin statement said Putin reaffirmed support for Maduro's policies to safeguard national interests and sovereignty. The language was pointed and deliberate. By emphasizing sovereignty, Moscow is directly challenging Washington's right to seize Venezuelan assets on the high seas. Russia is framing the American action as a flagrant violation of international norms that no responsible nation should accept. Both sides agreed to push forward joint projects in energy, finance, and humanitarian spheres. All of these efforts are being expanded under existing OPEC Plus mechanisms and bilateral agreements. Russia is positioning itself as Venezuela's economic lifeline, offering an alternative to Western markets that have been closed off by American sanctions. Where Washington closes doors, Moscow opens them. The coordination between Russia and Venezuela extends to global oil markets through OPEC+. Both nations are major oil producers, and both have faced American attempts to limit their exports. By working together within OPEC+, they can coordinate production levels and pricing strategies that protect their interests against American economic warfare. The phone call comes against a backdrop of escalating American military activity in the Caribbean. The U.S. has carried out multiple strikes in the region, claiming it is targeting drug cartel networks allegedly linked to Venezuela. These operations have killed dozens of people and destroyed numerous vessels. But critics question whether drug interdiction is the true purpose of America's Caribbean buildup. Venezuela's government has consistently denied any connection to drug trafficking operations. Maduro argues that Washington is manufacturing excuses to justify what amounts to an economic and military siege of his country. The seizure of the oil tanker, he would argue, proves beyond doubt that America's true target is Venezuela's economy and government, not drug cartels operating in the Caribbean. The tanker seizure does not exist in isolation. It follows weeks of intensifying American military operations throughout the Caribbean. A carrier strike group has been deployed to the region. A nuclear submarine lurks beneath the waves. Dozens of strikes have been carried out against vessels Washington claims are involved in drug trafficking. The pattern suggests a coordinated campaign of maximum pressure. When asked about the situation, the Kremlin delivered a pointed response. Venezuela is a sovereign state, officials said. In any case, we proceed from the fact that everything happening around Venezuela should occur in accordance with the spirit and letter of international law. The implication was unmistakable. The United States is acting as an outlaw nation, ignoring the very international rules it claims to uphold. Russian officials also addressed broader questions about regional conflicts. When asked about Trump's promises to resolve various international disputes, the Kremlin said it welcomes any steps toward peace. But the underlying message was skeptical. Russia has watched Washington make promises before, only to see American actions contradict American words. The call underscores an escalating geopolitical divide that shows no signs of narrowing. As the United States expands its military and economic footprint in the Caribbean, Russia and Venezuela are deepening their defense, energy, and diplomatic collaboration. Each American escalation is met with closer coordination between Caracas and Moscow. Venezuela offers Russia something invaluable, a strategic foothold in America's backyard. While Washington has spent decades treating Latin America as its exclusive sphere of influence, Moscow has been quietly building alliances with governments willing to challenge American dominance. Venezuela sits at the very center of that network, the anchor of Russia's presence in the Western Hemisphere. For Venezuela, Putin's outreach signals continued political cover and a powerful counterweight to U.S. influence. Maduro knows that as long as Russia and China stand behind him, Washington's ability to force regime change is significantly constrained. International support from major powers provides both legitimacy on the world stage and practical assistance on the ground. At the same briefing, China's foreign ministry spokesperson also commented on Washington's separate plan to form a coalition aimed at safeguarding global supply chains for rare earth minerals and artificial intelligence. Beijing warned against any efforts to weaponize supply chains or exclude China from critical global industries. The message was clear. China will not tolerate American attempts to dominate strategic resources. Washington's plan to build a coalition around rare earth and AI supply chains represents another front in the broader competition with China. These materials and technologies are essential to modern economies and military capabilities. Whoever controls them holds enormous leverage. China currently dominates rare earth production, and America wants to change that. What is emerging is a coordinated response from America's three most prominent adversaries. Russia provides military backing and energy support. China offers economic weight and diplomatic backing. Venezuela stands as the frontline state resisting American pressure in the Western Hemisphere. Together, they are constructing an alternative to the U.S.-led international order that has dominated since the Cold War. Trump's strategy could not be clearer. By seizing tankers and enforcing sanctions aggressively, Washington hopes to strangle Venezuela's economy until Maduro's government collapses from within. Oil revenues are the key to everything. Without them, Venezuela cannot pay its bills, cannot import essential goods, and cannot maintain the loyalty of the military and political figures who keep Maduro in power. The seizure of this tanker is unlikely to be the last. American officials have signaled their intention to track down the entire shadow fleet that Venezuela relies upon to export its oil. Every tanker captured is a direct blow to Maduro's finances. But every seizure also deepens the confrontation with Russia and China, who view these actions as illegal overreach that they cannot allow to go unanswered. Tensions show no signs of easing. Washington has hinted at more action against Venezuela in the coming weeks and months. Military assets remain positioned throughout the Caribbean, ready to strike at a moment's notice. The carrier strike group and nuclear submarine deployed to the region signal readiness for rapid escalation if the order comes from Washington. The Caribbean, long considered America's peaceful backyard, has been transformed into a theater of great power competition. American warships patrol the waters. Russian and Chinese influence grows on shore. Venezuela stands at the center of the storm, its fate tied to the outcome of this broader struggle between Washington and its rivals. With U.S. forces seizing Venezuelan assets and two of the world's major powers openly backing Caracas, the region has entered a new and dangerous phase. Russia and China are sending an unmistakable message to Washington. The days when America could act without consequence in its own hemisphere may be coming to an end. A new power dynamic is emerging, and Washington will have to reckon with it sooner rather than later.